Hey everybody, and welcome to this next edition of Orthodoxy. Get your questions answered. So today, you'll notice that in each place that I'm at, I have something different on the table. Last week we had some Greek sweets. The time before I had a little bit of rakia on the table. But I've got my absolute favorite Scotch whiskey on the table, Lagavulin, in fact, being served in the glass that commemorated then the anniversary of Lagavulin. We actually went to the Holy Land being the island of Isla, where, so, a little phone there. And so I got to actually go and see where that was being made. The reason I'm bringing all this up is because we are live tonight at Costantino's restaurant. We have the owner here, Prodromos, Pro.
Hello, everybody.
And he has the best selection of Scotch whiskeys and some good Irish whiskeys that I've seen. We've actually held one of our Scotch tastings here, and I'm looking forward, Pro, to be doing that in the future. So,
yes,
as they say, slancheva. So tell us a little bit about Costantino's.
Well, we've been here for 43 years. My dad opened up in May of 1977, and we're in our 43rd year. Unfortunately, this year's been a bad one with this COVID-19. We've been closed for roughly 11 weeks, hopefully looking to open up in another week and a half. We have a nice brick oven pizza. I'm not sure if got a picture of it yet, but we have a nice brick oven.
We're going to show that at the end.
Plenty of seating inside. Outside today actually is our first day having seating outside in a non-covered seating area.
In fact,
so
I did.
was a exciting day for us today to have customers actually sitting on premise having food and drinks.
Well, I came early because Pro has some delicious steaks that he has. He's got some great seafood, but I had to have some steak today. So actually, we were here to eat outside for your grand opening. I figured that would be nice to come here for your grand opening.
Actually, that's right. We planned this perfect. Grand opening for the outdoors, and Father came and had some nice steaks, gratis from A&G Meats, nice and fresh.
Nice. Now, another parishioner of ours, right?
Yes, another parishioner.
So again, obviously, if you don't already know by the name Prodromos, that Pro is one of our parishioners. I think you're Greek, right, Pro?
Of course. That's right. That's right.
All right. So, hey, thank you again very much. We appreciate
you for being here, Father.
We appreciate you lending your facility to us.
You're welcome.
All right. So we also then we're going to do a little bit different in the beginning here, because obviously, and Marissa, if you can grab a seat.
Sure.
So I've invited our moderator Marissa to come and join us, but we're going to do something a little bit different here tonight. Is, as you all know, there is quite a bit of unrest in our country currently. And one of the things that has to be addressed is, what do the churches say about this? They have to make commentary about this. One of the things I was very pleased to see, and the picture is up on our Annunciation Rochester website. You can go and see it. But in the spirit of Archbishop Iakovos of blessed memory, who marched in solidarity with Martin Luther King in the 1960s, our current Archbishop Elpidophoros was seen marching in solidarity with the protesters in New York City. And we kind of want to talk a little bit about this, because sometimes people see this issue as very black and white. And I'm going to have Marissa actually talk a little bit about this, and we're going to have a little dialogue here. But what's important to understand is that as much as the church needs to be involved, the church also then needs to be careful of her expression and what it is that she supports. I absolutely understand this, because in my time in the military as an officer, when I wore the uniform, I had to be very careful about what it was that I said, because my comments reflected not only myself, but the United States Army. The same thing in wearing the collar. Whatever I say doesn't reflect just on me, it reflects now on the church. But the church has to have a presence. Now, Marissa, you were actually, excuse me, you were actually in the protest today, meaning that that you marched with them, you were present. So tell us a little bit about that. And obviously, we're talking about Rochester, right?
Yeah. So on our way over here, because with the Times and everyone talking about it and everything happening, I informed Father A that I went to the protest on Saturday downtown in Rochester, and I was there for the entirety of it until things got incredibly wild. But I went because I want to be on the right side of history and be there in supporting of people who are feeling an incredible amount of pain and hurt over the murder of George Floyd and so many other Black Americans here in the United States. And I think it's the most Christian thing I can do is to help amplify the voices of those who are unheard and, be there with them and protect them and their voice.
So now when you were there, was there peaceful protest, but then was there also unpeaceful protest, if I can use that term?
Oh, sure. Yeah, in the beginning, the first 4 hours, for one thing, people should be aware that most of the time protests have a permit behind them. So the organizers of the protests, they work with the police department, so to speak, to have them there because they also need to have a presence of the police there to protect also the protesters, right? So the police were there for the majority of the thing, but around 4 or 5 p.m., we went back to, I think it's called the Civic Center downtown, the police headquarters. And so a bunch of us were on the front lines, including myself. And, police came out and I tried to have a discussion with some of the police and, about hey, are these things you guys are talking about in your precinct?
And was that a positive discussion?
It was also really hard for me to hear, and I think it was hard for them to hear me. But I think for the most part it was, and it was a way for me to kind of get an idea of what the cops are doing in the city of Rochester and whether or not they care and, whether or not what they stand with us, right? Could they be willing to come on the other side of the protest line and stand with us, shake our hand or bump elbows or whatever we're doing these days and, stand with us in solidarity. Ali Ligi, right?
No.
So, yeah, could they be able to do that? I think was my goal. And, because, right, people are protesting effectively for police change, at least, or defunding the police in extremes, they left cop cars out as kind of a barricade, and people who are protesting the police are obviously going to want to jump on the cop cars.
So now,
and that's when things started to kind of get rough. But
now, before we kind of went live here, you had mentioned kind of alluding to this idea of Passover, and I wanted you to talk about that because I thought it was actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm sorry I got into kind of the details there, but the thing that is interesting, right? While we were driving over here, is we saw all these businesses boarded up to protect their windows and their merchandise from riots, etc.
Yes.
Or people wanting to loot. And, it could almost kind of, you see businesses that will say Black-owned business, in the window, for instance, and it's almost like the marking above your door over Passover, right? To protect your firstborn son from, the angel of death coming through your city. And so I'm sure many Christians might even view what these riots are as kind of that thing, right? But I think we need to realize that, your firstborn son is not a Target. It is not a Starbucks, right? In the context of firstborn sons and daughters of African Americans in this country have been systematically oppressed in so many different ways that, you know, policing has become a problem, and we need to address like our role and what we want police to do for our society and how they operate and interact with people, especially marginalized people such as African Americans.
So, so then let me ask. So, as a layperson, let me ask you this question: as a priest, what do you expect, or what would you expect, other than marching, with protesters? What role do you see that, and let's just talk about the Orthodox Church, I don't want to confuse with other churches, let's just speak for ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, as a layperson, what is your expectation of the church in this larger scheme of not just protesting, but of why the protests are happening?
Well, why, like, let me ask, like, for you to clarify a little bit. Do you mean, like, what role do I think the church should have in the current problems that are happening in our society? Is that what you're asking?
Absolutely right. Because you talked about this idea, this Christian idea, and certainly a lot of the things that are going on right now, are not new. These are historical problems that have racism and things like that. We've had that throughout the history of our church. But today, here in America, what would you like the church, and obviously the church is us, the body of Christ, what would you like to see us do? What should we be doing?
Well, like, we got to think about, like, right, we're a Greek Orthodox Church in the city of Rochester. So not only are we just a community of Greek Orthodox parishioners, in your church, in our church, but we're also members of the Rochester community.
Sure, okay.
Right? And so a part of that is understanding the history of our community, and looking back at the July 1964 riots that occurred and learning from them and talking to people who lived through both situations, right? And listening to them and getting to know them and providing them us, right? Like, people are afraid to go to certain sides of the city, so to speak, or, doing away with this kind of talk about things that is so racialized, and tied to poverty, and welcoming people in and just getting to know your neighbor, right? Like, treat people how you want to be treated, right? And I would say just, like, think about, like, what Jesus would do, right? What is the most Christian thing you can do?
What do you think that's what I'm asking. What do you think Jesus would do?
Well, I think Jesus would protect the protesters who were there. I think, like, Jesus would probably stand up in the front of the line and be there to take, like, a beating from a police officer who's telling them to back down. I don't necessarily think Jesus might have lit a cop car on fire,
right.
But, I think...
I like that.
We're going to save that for the virtual Sunday school.
Yes.
But I think, right, like, Jesus would want to be there for those who are clearly in pain and have no other way of expressing that pain other than rioting and other than looting, right? And we can't rob those people of their voices by saying, like, these are outside people, from different places, right? Like, sure, maybe some people are, but also, like, take it at face value that I'm sure there are people in our community who participate in that, and that's a function of the pain they feel in our society.
Right.
And we got to figure out together how to, like, get through that, and we need to actively work, to address how policing is operated or operating in our city, and, making the changes that are needed so that, the police serve us, right? Like, as citizens, and also police are citizens, right? So we need to... Right,
and that's really where I want to see and I think the church, but the church operates in a balance, okay?
Yeah.
The church is not a church of the poor. The church is not a church of the rich. It's not a church of the middle class. It's a church of the entire, as you said, the entire community. And so I know that the situation is very complex because a protest is not a monolithic thing.
No.
It's not one person and everybody has the same idea of what should happen. I mean, when you look at that picture of El Pie de Foros, the Archbishop marching, in that you're going to see a lot of different signs being held up. Some of those signs you may agree with, and other signs you may not agree with. But I certainly don't believe that the church cannot partake of the larger purpose just because there's one sign that says defund the police.
Yeah.
I don't think the Orthodox Church would say, well, we want to give the police force less money.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we certainly have to take a stand against brutality.
Yeah.
Right. And so I wanted to kind of unpack this a little bit because it's not a very clean issue. There's a lot going on here, and the church's response to that certainly has to be, I think, more than just talking. But
there's value in that, right? Like, this is all, especially because, like, right, we're a predominantly white church, and acknowledging that and talking about that and understanding why, that's really crucial, right? And having these uncomfortable discussions, it's really important that we are talking about this, because, like, I know it's difficult for me to talk to my parents about these issues because I know their beliefs aren't like mine, and that's hard. But I think it's important that we get on the same page about these things and have these uncomfortable discussions about race and class in our country.
But don't you think then that our church has to then reach out larger to the larger community? When we talk to only ourselves, we only have our opinions, right?
Yeah. But are you talking to people who have the same opinion or different opinions?
And I think that you just mentioned it, that our church is culturally pretty Greek.
Yeah.
So we have, I'm not saying that every one of our parishioners thinks the same, but I don't think our church, let's say, has an understanding of what happens in a Pentecostal church or in a Black Baptist church. I don't think I think that it's important that I want to key in on what you said about community, that in order to feel somebody's pain, you have to walk somewhat in those shoes, I would think, right?
Yeah, and also, like, celebrate the similarities you also have, like, right? Like, music is such a powerful part of, like, a Black Baptist church, whereas, like, chanting here is, like, such a powerful component of our church, and it's like a beautiful sacred thing, So it's like finding the things that you have in common and celebrating them as well, and appreciating the beauty in all of them, right?
Right. So again, I didn't want to take too much time, but it is important for us to recognize the dialogue here and what is happening currently. The church needs to be current in what's happening. So I felt it important that Marissa and I just kind of talk a little bit about that. And so if you have questions that are related to that in terms of, what Marissa's experiences were, what you think the church should do, then we certainly want to invite then those questions. I know that we have a lot of viewers who are not from our country, and so they may not necessarily understand our American culture, and that they may not necessarily feel what racism is in this country. So we invite those questions too. So that was kind of just getting us warmed up and getting us started. But being that Marissa was involved in the in the protest today, I thought it'd be nice to get her, or interesting to get your perspective, being on the front lines right there.
Yeah.
Well, you should point out it was the other day, not today.
It wasn't today, it was Saturday.
Oh, it was Saturday.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, it was Saturday. All right, okay.
Yeah.
So not to freak anybody out.
Yeah, okay, that's right. It's Saturday. Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of, like, differences and, especially given that you brought up differences across Christian faiths, right? Zenjin, I think that's how I pronounce your name. I'm really sorry if I am butchering that. They ask, how do I deal with my father being a Pentecostal and hating Orthodoxy? This is actually quite an apt question, I think.
Absolutely. The main point that I received from my spiritual father, and again, Orthodox, very similar to Catholic, we have a spiritual father that we go to, our father confessor, just like you would have a father confessor.
Who are you?
Yeah, well, sometimes it's the parish priest, sometimes it's not. So the way that he taught me is that each person needs to find Christ. Where they find Christ is different for each person. For some, the Orthodox Church is where they find the fullness of Christ. And for some, it's in the Protestant Church, okay, in those different expressions. And for some, it's in the Pentecostal Church. Now, myself, I've been to a Pentecostal church. President Dad and I went, okay. It was very interesting, but it didn't speak to me. So it was not a place that I was comfortable, so it impeded my relationship with Christ because I didn't understand it. So the answer to the question is that as long and we're speaking about his father, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. The important thing is, and as my father said, that I want you to find and meet Christ where he is present in your life. And for me, that was Orthodoxy. And for Marissa, Orthodoxy. But that doesn't mean that that's the only place. So in that sense, that's how I would start that discussion or begin that discussion, is saying that Pentecostalism works for your father. But I am my own man, and something else then works for me. But both of us find Christ. And in the end, for our salvation and to gain eternal life, that's really the only thing that's important. And I think that that's where that discussion should begin.
But then, what kind of, functional things, what kind of questions do you think he can ask his father, kind of going forward to unravel what that hate means, Any sort of, specific, example questions you can think of?
Yeah, that's great point. So what I would say is begin that discussion by asking what it is that he likes about Pentecostalism, and then relate that to then what we have then in Orthodoxy, because at the core of Pentecostalism you have the Holy Spirit. What does the Orthodox Church have? The Holy Spirit. So that discussion then has to begin about what is it that you feel about the Pentecostal faith that you really enjoy? What do you like? Rather than attacking it, support it. What is it that you really like? And then and that brings you to that. And when he answers that, then you can answer in an Orthodox way and say, yes, as Orthodox, here is how we would express that thought.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. He also asks, and I'm not sure what this question really means, but also, are toll houses accepted in Greek churches? Do you know what that question means?
Yes.
What does it mean?
Yeah, we were talking about the toll house, the Keebler elves.
Oh, can you explain kind of the context of this question?
Oh, yes.
For people who might not know, like myself.
The Nestle gang.
The Nestle gang, right? Not like the 5 points gang. This is something different. But seriously, tall houses is outside of the mainstream of Orthodox theology. So it is an attempt, mainly by Father Seraphim Rose of blessed memory, who has passed away, monastic in the Orthodox faith, who sought to give an explanation of then our journey to heaven after death. So very similar to this idea of St. John Climacus and the ladder, where as you ascended to heaven after your death, you're escorted by your guardian angel, but at the same time you're being pulled down by then the demons. And toll houses are stops, if I can say that, stops along the way where you are evaluated based on what it is that you've done. Obviously, this would be rejected in a Protestant sense because it smacks of deeds and works and things like that, and doesn't necessarily emphasize the faith as much. But in mainstream Orthodoxy, toll house is not an accepted theology. It is a part of Orthodoxy, and that's what makes Orthodoxy beautiful, is that there's no one mind. there are these different avenues. We can't deny that there are toll houses, but we can't support it either because you have to die in order to be able to speak about it.
Yeah. Oh. Speaking of our previous conversation, before we got into Zenjin's, is that how you, Zenjin's questions? I'm really sorry, Zenjin. I'm the worst. But Spiro, I remember you from last week, asks, how does the church feel about the looting and the killing of police officers as part of the protesting? So I haven't heard of any police officers. There have been.
Yep. Oh yeah.
I know for me personally, I don't stand for any violence whatsoever. But would you like to go on and continue?
Yeah, so, and the easiest answer to this is that Orthodoxy does not support violence of any kind. So that means World War II, that means Vietnam, that means Korea, that means protests. We do not support violence in any of its forms. But it is a pragmatic reality of today, right? There is violence, there is war. And the behavior that the church looks at is, why are you participating in this? Okay, so the idea of render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Okay, for us in the military, when I raised my hand, took the oath, and said that I would serve and defend the Constitution of the United States and obey those lawful orders, okay, those lawful orders included or could include some degree of violence to the point of death, okay? And so we would abhor any kind of violence, but we understand that it is necessary. In the case of looting, okay, there is not a greater good that is being served here, because again, as Christians, we are always outward looking, not inward looking. Looting for us is always inward looking. It is something that I want to do for myself. I want that TV, I want that, or I just want to be doing something that others are doing. So it's very inward looking, and so we would reject that. Again, the same thing with violence against police officers. We always believe, as you mentioned, that dialogue is the answer. And for us as Orthodox, the answer is always to enter into dialogue. And once that it degrades into violence, then we're not going to achieve that solution, because now we will become black and white, right? Black and white, not in a racist way, but in terms of.
Yeah, it's an apt saying, I suppose. I would kind of like, and I'm gonna go off a bit on my own personal take on things, and I'm not saying that the church believes this at all, but.
Well, I'll let you know.
When it comes to like, I suppose, like if this was like just a standard run-of-the-mill kind of like protest, right? Like what we saw with like the women's marches like back in 2016 and 2017, right? They just hit the news for like an hour, say, and then everyone forgot about it like a week later, right? There is a utility, not that I'm advocating for it and not saying that I personally would go out and light a police car on fire, but it grabs your attention. And it kind of begs you, and it should beg you the question as a Christian, why am I caring so much about my property more than the lives of all of these people who have been killed? And that it has brought them to this point, that there's violence and that there is rioting for them to get my attention. And why am I asking myself why I care more about a Target or a Starbucks having its windows broken than, these people who are just blatantly murdered, right? That's my take.
And to some extent answer that question, historically, if we looked at the 1st and 2nd century after Christ's death and resurrection, that was a very, very brutal time for early Christians, all right? And in that time, we did not necessarily see Christians involved in protest, but we saw Christians involved in silent protest unto their death. we also saw that Christians were always there to take care of those that were injured, regardless of if they were a Roman soldier or they were a poor beggar or they were just somebody that was caught in the crossfire. Our role has always been to preach the word and to take care of those people that are injured and to not show any bias, whether it be to an authority, whether it be to the poor, that we are always then on an equal playing field. So historically, protesting has not been a Christian ideal. That's not to say that Christians should not protest when things are not getting resolved, but it is important that we as Christians always are sympathetic and empathetic towards all people, that we see everybody as the image and likeness of God.
Yeah, and you actually will see acts of that, I will say, at a protest. Like, I almost was, like, shocked, kind of, like, how quickly people came with water in, like, jugs. So when people were tear-gassed, if you needed to clear your eyes, there's someone with water who can help you rinse out your eyes in the moment, and it doesn't matter whether or not you're a police officer or... or if you're someone protesting, if you're in pain, I'm sure someone will get down to, like, help you there. We're not there to, like, cause violence. We're there to, like, assert our, beliefs and, adhere to our Americanism by, like, enacting free speech and, standing up and using our rights and participating.
I saw yesterday on the news a wonderful case where one of the policemen, and I can't remember in what city it was, one of the policemen got separated from his unit, and many of the protesters gathered around him in a circle to protect him.
Yeah.
So again, I thought that was a wonderful showing that we are not here because we hate policemen but we hate what's going on, but we don't hate the individual, and that's who we are. Again, hate the sin and not the sinner is sometimes we're apt to say.
Yeah. So actually, apparently, you have asked, how does the church feel about its priests having served in the military if the church doesn't condone violence? The priests may have served during war. In fact, I think maybe your wife has asked this question.
Read the next part.
Oh, apparently also the church, which is like an institution, also has a voice, apparently. Father is apparently so talented that he can ask questions and answer them at the same time. So
Who said that?
Amos is so funny.
He is hilarious. But the question about read that one more time.
Yeah, just how does the church feel? Like, for instance, with you, right? You've served in the military. Like, what is the church's stance on, like, servicemen and people who have served in the military in some respect or been to war? Like, war involves violence. Like, what does the church think about that?
So, and several of us in a seminary military kind of gathered together, and there was about 5 or 6 of us in each of the branches. I was Army, my best buddy was Navy, we had an Air Force guy, we had a Marine Corps guy, and there was a Coast Guard guy in there too. And so we became obviously friends, and I should say obviously, but we became friends. And as we were approaching graduation, they called each one of us, and I'm talking about the Archbishop from the seminary, and they called us in, and the question that they asked us was, why did you serve in the military? Question number 1. And the answer that they were looking for is God and country. That I believe that I, as an American citizen, have an obligation to serve my country. And that's what they were looking for. So what they didn't want to hear is, hey, I want to kill somebody, or I love guns, or I want a lot of power, or I've always wanted to be in a leadership position. So they were looking again for that outward versus inward, all right? And the next question that they asked was, do you have remorse for what you did? Okay? For those of us, not me personally, I didn't kill anybody, but for those that actually then killed people in battle, then they had to go through a repentance, a penance, and then that penance then was forgiven. But they wanted to know, was it murder? or were you shooting a combatant? So they really wanted to dig into those reasons. So the church, the seminary spent a lot of time evaluating our reasons for wanting to be in the military. And we were very glad to see that it wasn't just like, yeah, okay, that what happens today, which is, oh, thank you for your service, and you don't think about what you did. There are, just as we see in the protests today, that there are good officers, good police officers, and there are those police officers that are not necessarily good. It's the same way with the military. And the military suffers this problem too, is that there are many, many, many good soldiers, but there are also those then that need to be weeded out. And the church wanted to find that out. But we were not allowed to be ordained without having gone to confession, penance, and then a good understanding of why it is that we served. So that's actually a great question.
Yeah, totally. And like, it is super nuanced, right? Like, I'm actually really curious about the people who you were speaking about when asked, like, why did you go this path? And like, they're saying, I like guns. Like, I'm sure they didn't blatantly just say that,
yes,
right?
They did.
They did?
Yes,
okay.
They did.
Okay. Yeah.
Because, we have
I guess guns are cool, fun.
Well, we have a lot of cool weapons. And people, there are a lot of guys who just want to fire from a tank. They just want to fire a tank, or they want to see a 50 cal machine gun being fired. That's their passion, and that's not who the military is.
What was it like, I suppose, to kind of like be in a world with this attitude and also like having these very deep kind of reasons for doing what you're doing, very, very like kind of personal, deep reasons for going into the military that you have, and I'm sure many of your peers and colleagues had, but then also being lumped into like these very kind of almost superficial reasons for doing the same thing. What was it like for you to
it really
sit with that, I guess?
It really wasn't a problem, because when we identified those people, then we let the chain of command go, and in the vast majority of cases, I know that doesn't happen all the time, but in the vast majority of cases, those people then were weeded out. Because at the end of the day, being in the military is about trust. That I have to trust that you, as a soldier, is going to protect me, and that I'm going to protect you. And if we feel that you're going to do something arbitrary, that you're going to do something motivated out of sheer power or insanity, then I can't trust you, and I can't have you in my unit. So really, those people are weeded out organically, meaning that we don't need higher up to tell us that. We already know that we can't trust you, and we want you out. We don't want you part of our unit. And I see that also in paramilitary forces like the police force, because it's that same level of trust.
Yeah. Going on. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry to listeners. So T Griff 5747 has some comments and questions. Maggos, it's dicey, but generally the desire for participation in a just war is morally good. However, once you're enlisted or commissioned, you're subjected to obedience to your superior. Obviously, in a practical sense, in other words, military code of law, but also morally.
No, stop there.
Oh, but then T. Griff also asks, does the Greek Orthodox Church recognize Saint Moses the Black?
And so, quick answer to you say quick answer to Saint Moses the Black. Yes, we do. We do recognize him as a saint of the church. So Moses is good. As far as the other one goes, I have to stress that after the Vietnam My Lai incident of Lieutenant Calley, the code of conduct for the United States military was changed. And that we as soldiers, whether we're enlisted of the NCO rank or of officers, we are only required to obey legal, lawful, and moral orders. we do not have to obey every order that's given to us. If we feel that that order is illegal or immoral, then we are not bound. In fact, we are bound to disobey that order. And that change came about from the My Lai incident in Vietnam.
Could you perhaps like tell us more about that incident? Like, what happened? Like, you know, some viewers might not be aware or like educated on the topic of like all the different events in Vietnam. Like, do you feel comfortable talking about it?
And again, not to provide all the specific details, but there was a situation in Vietnam where Lieutenant Calley, and again, there's a whole thing about was he just a pawn in this whole thing, and I'm going to get into that. But the way that it at least came out was that Lieutenant Calley had ordered then a raid, or he was ordered to conduct a raid on a North Vietnamese village. In the village, there were women and children, non-combatants, and they opened fire on that village, and they killed non-combatants under the orders of Lieutenant Calley. His defense was that I was ordered now to take this position. And the ruling on that was he was court-martialed because he conducted an immoral act, and his soldiers had said that they did not want to participate in that, and they were being court-martialed for that act.
Oh wow.
And that's where that case came from. Is that they should not have been pressured to then obey an immoral act.
And then, is there another new question? Oh, are you saying, sorry, Amos is motioning to me to like do things. But kind of going off of that too, I also want to ask more about like, I know we're talking a lot about like the current state of things and like the military and violence and stuff, and like, you know, like where the line is, you know, how nuanced these things are. They're not just like black and white. I know we've talked a lot about this and not as much of like emphasizing the church's, well, the church can help us, guide us in this kind of time, right?
Absolutely.
But I want to kind of ask more, like, can you, like, for instance, like, tell me a bit more about, like, Moses the Black, for instance? Like, yes, we recognize him, but what do we know about him?
And unfortunately, you kind of caught me on the unawares because I do not have the history of Moses the Black.
But do we have someone who does?
Yes, we do.
Can we have a guest speaker?
Yes, I think Terry can give us a little information about.
I think Terry should come on in. You're camera shy.
Now, I guess before I answer the Moses the Black, I'm going to have to save that, so I'm going to have to get you to tune into next week. What I don't want to do is I don't want to read something off of the internet because, contrary to what most people believe, there is a lot of stuff on the internet that is not true. I know that shocks you. Okay.
No, it doesn't.
Except this. This is all truth 100% of the time, right? No.
I don't know.
I'm like
a lot of it is opinions. I'm just kidding.
I'm like Chris Matthews. Hardball.
This is truer than Chris Matthews.
This is truer than Chris Matthews. Okay. So we'll have to wait on that, and I will answer that question on our next Thursday session.
Yes. I'm going to try and look at some of the questions that Demos got since our last Thursday question answered session. So Jerry Vanderlee asks, and this is as pertains to the question answer session on censoring, or like the
To sense.
To sense.
Right.
I heard a different story about the censor from a Russian Orthodox priest. He said it was already in use by the Jews, but it was used to chase the flies away from the holy altar, I guess as a way to kind of like...
Pest control.
Pest control, yes. Now they use it to represent the moving of the Holy Spirit. This brings up the question to Jerry. Why do priests have different explanations? Like, why isn't there kind of like a uniform answer to all of this?
Well, the easiest answer to that is, and again, no insult to my brethren, but we're not Catholic. And we don't have a universal answer to everything. This is the joy and the pain of being Orthodox, is that if you want an answer to the question and you ask 4 priests, you'll get 5 answers. It is unfortunately who we are. But when we are different in those ways, we are different with a small t tradition. So none of us in Orthodoxy would deny that Jesus is the Son of God and part of the Holy, and a person of the Holy Trinity.
And that's capital T, right?
Capital T tradition, absolutely right. None of us would disagree that a consecration act occurs during the anaphora, during the epiclesis, and that this is the body and blood of Jesus Christ that we consume. No Orthodox will question that. But when we have small t traditions, each one of our churches grew up in different lands. Okay, the marriage crown is the perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Okay, in Greece we have olive branches, we have olive trees. Okay, so the simplest thing for us to do is to take an olive branch, right, and to honor our Greek heritage, because that's what they received as the winners of the Olympics. We use that as a crowning, so that Stephana makes sense. A Stephana is just a crown. Okay, if you go to Russia now, okay, Russians, olive trees is not their thing, all right? But the idea of a czar and the idea of a king and a queen and a crowning, that makes sense. So they wear a crown on the top of their heads, all right? So each one of us has our own traditions. The same thing happens then with censing, all right? So one of the things that I didn't mention is that in the Mideast, okay, where there wasn't a lot of bathing going on, and you get Hagia Sophia, and there's no air conditioning in the summertime, censing was a way to cover up the funk. I mean, we were funky people back then. It's 102 degrees, right? You're locked in a small church, right? Okay, and you're sweating. All right, so that covered up the scent. At the same time, though, I could see in a closed environment where you have a lot of insects, and certain scents will repel certain insects. Absolutely right. So you can have, and we are very comfortable as Orthodox with having these different explanations, because for those small t traditions, each one of us grows up in a different culture in a different land.
So does that mean then that sensing is small t or capital T?
Absolutely small t. Does it come from the Jews? Were the Jews the first to sense? Absolutely. In fact, in Isaiah, may my incense rise before you. We say it in our Vesper service. There's no doubt that we didn't create sensing. Now, as Greeks, we have the best deal on a censer. All right, so if you want a good price on it, that's the old joke, by the way. If you want the theology of the censer, you go to the Antiochians. And if you want then the best method of sensing, you go to the Russians. If you want the best deal on a censer, you go to the Greeks. That's the running joke there.
So say a new Orthodox church comes about, like alien Orthodoxy,
Or American
American,
Orthodox.
and they decide sensing is not our thing. Could they still be Orthodox? Like,
So-
can you have a Sunday at church without sensing and call yourself Orthodox?
And the answer to that is yes, you can. The problem, though, is that tradition is very important for the minds and the hearts of the people. It's a part of who we are. So can I come to, and kind of using the example I had from last week, can I come to your house and can I take every single picture and photograph from your house, and can you still survive?
I guess, but it would hurt my feelings.
Okay, and it's very important for you to have those photographs around you.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not food, it doesn't keep you alive, okay, but it speaks to your heart. Okay, if I took that away from you, then you would feel that you lost a part of yourself. This is the same way with sensing. Okay, it's the same way with the spoon. Okay,
Yeah.
the spoon is a tradition. Okay, it's not dogma, it's not doctrine. All right, it's just a tradition that we do. If we take the spoon away, will people feel something lost? Absolutely. Same thing with sensing. But no, there can be an Orthodox Church without sensing.
Also, T. Griff 5747 says, "Thank you, Father. I'll watch next week." Awesome.
Awesome. All right. Say
Yeah, glad to have you.
Moses the Black. I gotta work on Moses the Black.
Yes. So Jerry also says, when it comes to dating outside of Orthodoxy, there is a saying in the Netherlands, and it says, "If there are two religions in one bed, the devil sleeps in the middle." Oh, yikes. I don't know if there's a question there, but do you want to perhaps comment on that?
I think if I might be so bold, that he's saying that if you date somebody from another religion,
then
when you share a bed, there's always going to be a friction between you. There's always going to be the devil between you.
Yeah.
Okay, and you know what, and I do, and speaking for the church, I do have to somewhat agree with that, because this is why the Orthodox Church does not allow an interfaith marriage. We allow inter-Christian marriage. So we have absolutely no issue with a Catholic and Orthodox marrying, a Protestant and Orthodox marrying. We have no problem with that because their Christianity is their binding agent. So they come together. That's not, the devil's not going to come between that, all right? But if we have somebody that is Christian marrying a Muslim, or if you have Christian that is marrying Jewish, okay, those are radically theologically different beliefs. So my experience is that one of two things will happen, is that when they have children, then they will not influence the children one way or the other, and then let them make the decision when they get older. Okay, I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous, because if you don't train them in what the faith is, how can they make an informed decision? So if I say to you, or you come to me, let's say as my daughter, and you say, I want to be a doctor, but I think I want to be a lawyer. And I say to you, well, you know what? Just think about it and see what makes sense to you. That's the stupidest answer ever, because you have to study what it means to be a lawyer, and then you have to study to mean what a doctor, okay, and then with an informed data, you can make a decision.
Yeah, you got to research.
So the child is going to grow up then, and unfortunately, I know a lot of situations like that where the child grows up with nothing, and then the decision they make is nothing, is no faith. So, if you are Jewish and you are Orthodox, teach them about Orthodoxy, teach them about Judaism, and then when they are of age, they can choose. They can choose. They can make the informed decision. The other thing that I see happening too, and why again interfaith marriage are difficult for us, is that it becomes then a point of contention, and the child is used as the weapon. I'm going to make the child Jewish. He's going to have a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah. No, he's going to be baptized in the church. Well, you know what? You can baptize him today, and I'm going to give him a bar mitzvah tomorrow. Now you're convoluting religions. I mean, they're distinct, and so we don't want to make light of either faith. Really, just a quick story here. Part of our interfaith council in Flint, when I was in Flint, we had a rabbi, and Rabbi Karen, and we had some really great discussions, and I really enjoyed just going to lunch with her and just having that discussion. And I remember her telling me that she had a non-denominational church call her and ask her for a shofar, the horn that they blow, right? Okay, and so the rabbi asked him, why do you want it? And he says, because I want to call my congregation to prayer. And she says, but that's not your tradition. It has no meaning for you, and I am not going to give you something so you can make fun of my religion. I thought that was really interesting, right?
It's an appropriation.
Yeah, it's an appropriation
Yeah.
that doesn't belong to you. Good way to put that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have some more comments and questions. So
How we doing on time, Demos?
These should be the last two.
Okay.
yeah, what time is it? Oh, wow. Okay. Ooh, this happened fast. So T. Griff, before I wanted to clarify that they're Byzantine Catholic, so they're not really sure what belongs to which tradition. I'm glad you're tuning in.
Yeah.
And then Old Gringo says, I'm not Orthodox yet. I just contacted a father from a local Orthodox church here, Kansas City area. I just found this live chat. Wonderful. So we welcome you, Old Gringo.
Hey, nice to have you. Nice to have you.
Yeah. Welcome.
So what do we do in the Byzantine Catholics?
Yeah, tell us more. Gary Ballard Tony says, what if I'm Orthodox Christian? Or what if an Orthodox Christian is politically conservative? I think
All right.
some are, many are, I don't know.
Oh, absolutely.
Whatever, yeah.
Really quick, for those that don't know, basically, Byzantine Catholic is the Orthodox Church that commemorates the Roman Catholic Pope. The liturgy is the same. It's the St. John Chrysostom liturgy. They were an Orthodox church. Many times they're in the Arab lands. There are Melkites, which are Greek Catholics, so they are Byzantine Catholics. There are Marianites, which are the Syrians, the Jordanians, the Palestinians. So they were Orthodox. They wear the same vestments. They say the same St. John liturgy. They usually speak in their native language, just like we would speak Greek. They would speak Arabic. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up. And then the other question was about the.
Gary asks, what if an Orthodox Christian is politically conservative?
Nothing wrong with that. Again, as Orthodox, we are multifaceted. You cannot say that an Orthodox Christian believes X, other than dogmatic statements. Holy Trinity, Jesus is God. He's one of the persons of the Holy Trinity. Okay, outside of those things, you cannot put Orthodox in a box. Again, this is why I love Orthodoxy, because I can be Greek and I can be Orthodox. I can be Romanian and I can be Orthodox. I don't have to lose the essence of who I am. I am not assimilated. This is why the Orthodox Church was so powerful when we went into other lands, because our role was not to assimilate you to our faith, which many times in the non-denominational churches that visit other lands, that's what they do. Yeah. What you're doing is wrong. This is right. The Orthodox never did that. They take that culture, they absorb it in, and they express it as a Christian expression. They see the Christianity in that.
You missed a really great opportunity to use like mosaic as like a metaphor. I'm just saying. We're a mosaic.
We're a mosaic. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
right?
Mosaic.
Just like our beautiful church.
Just like our beautiful church is mosaic. But did I answer that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And then Old Gringo thanks us, and they also say that they had attended a Byzantine Rite church, and they're all Ruthenian.
Byzantine Rite, Byzantine Catholic, same thing.
Yeah.
And they're all Ruthenian.
Ruthenian. Can you explain a bit about like what Ruthenian is? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Oh, topic for next week.
Topic for next week. We'll look into it.
Same with the Inquiring Humanist.
Yes, the Inquiring Humanist asks, that's exactly what happened when Orthodoxy spread to Russia. Wait, can you explain a little bit? Why am I shouting at the phone? I don't understand. But yeah.
So with the land of Rus is a very, very interesting and very, very beautiful thing for the Orthodox, is because our patriarch at the time of Constantinople sent out the saint who became saints, Cyril and Methodius, to go and to spread the good news to them. And one of their first things that they did when they went there was to give them a written language. They had a spoken language. We gave them the Cyrillic language. We gave them the language, and Cyril, they honored him by making it the Cyrillic language. So the idea wasn't to take over the Russians or the Rus, okay, or the Slavs, is that we went there and then we offered them then just to update. I'm using modern technology here. Update what it is that they had. Give them a written language.
Yeah.
Let's finish up with the last question. Inquiring humanist.
Yes, Inquiring Humanist asks what he was describing about how Orthodoxy absorbs aspects of a culture into the tradition. Yeah, that's exactly what happened in Russia. Yeah, with Orthodoxy in Russia. Like, right, there's like a... Can you, like, perhaps elaborate a little bit more on, like, you know, for instance, there's different types of, you know, like, the fact that we were talking about this, right? What was the word, Terry? With, like, the Cypriot Church, for instance, Cypriot Orthodox Church, they are... autocephalous, right?
Yes.
And so, like, so many of these different churches being autocephalous and kind of, in some respect, representing different cultures, right? But we're all still Orthodox.
And actually, I think that that's going to really segue into next week.
Yeah, we should talk about this
So
next week.
tune in next week for more about how the Orthodox Church does what it
Yeah.
is that you were saying there. My empty whiskey glass, my current glass, indicates that we are out of time. But again, the official Scotch whiskey of Orthodoxy is, by the way, Lagavulin from the island of Isla. I just wanted to make that known in case anybody has
Macallan.
anything different. What?
Macallan.
See, Presbyterian now is arguing
So,
about Macallan.
have we absorbed this into our tradition?
We have absorbed this definitely into our tradition. Jack Daniels is not part of our tradition, so that's now I'm going to make.
What about
all-
Jim Beam, though?
Jim Beam is a catechumen.
Oh,
He's
my Lord.
coming into the church, but
Ugh.
not yet absorbed
Okay.
into the Orthodox Church.
Okay.
We'll have a conversation with Margarita next week.
Well, hey, again, thanks everybody for tuning in and for watching. Marissa, I'm really glad that we had that beginning conversation about the protest. The church has to speak on current events. We're not a museum; we're a living organism. And I think that it's very important to hear not only a priest's perspective, but also then a layperson's perspective and somebody who actually participated in this. So she's not just somebody talking about it; she's actually somebody who is in the mix, if I can say that.
Yeah, and have these difficult discussions with your family and friends and colleagues. You know, feel uncomfortable and, you know, get to know one another for the better of
The greater good.
for society. Yeah.
So again, and I want to thank Pro and Jeannie for Pro's wife Jeannie for allowing us to use this forum. Unfortunately, their brick oven is now closed. Oh well, what can we do?
You have to come here to see it.
Well, you have to come here to actually see it. And remember, they are open. They're serving outside. Both Terry and I just had their wonderful steaks. You had the Reuben, which I think you liked. You really enjoyed. Okay, and you had the brick oven pizza, Demos. I think, right? So
I was looking right at a brick oven while setting up.
I mean,
can I do
how
anything else?
much better does it get than that, right? So again, it was a pleasure to have all of you here, and we'll see you next week. I won't reveal where that site is, mainly because I don't know where the next site is, but we will see you then next week, next Thursday.
Bye, everyone.